What I want to get out of it, and I was very clear to everyone, that there has to be something for everyone to take away today that's useful. I think hearing about TCF, GPT, OPJA, PAIR, looking at those wonderful diagrams that you have there, my day-to-day experience is when I host leadership sessions, when I sit down a marketing leader, a privacy leader, a legal leader, and a procurement leader in a room as leadership cohorts, and we talk about the impact that privacy is having on marketing, media, and measurement initiatives, it's very clear that acronyms don't help. And whatever we talk about in this room here is very different to what the legal and privacy teams are talking about. Can someone put their hand up if they know the name of their privacy leader in their business? That's much better than last year. Brilliant. Who did that after they read my post the other day saying I'm going to ask that question? So that's the most important thing that I would always say as a takeaway here is looking at the demand for our white paper that we've just released around pixels, privacy, and tags, specifically because Carly Kind, Privacy Commissioner, if no one was aware of this, has mentioned that pixels are under scrutiny as well, and she was very clear about that in an article. The legal team may just come down and knock on your door and say, what are you doing? And if you don't know them before they come down and do that and work together, that would probably be quite problematic. So I do want to understand PAIR, and JJ, you didn't go into too much detail, I don't think, about the open sourcing of PAIR. So I'm hoping, if you have time, Chris, and if you don't mind, I'll interrupt you halfway through, you can explain what PAIR is. I would love to understand what the open sourcing of PAIR means to everyone here on the panel, and obviously those here as well. So starting on the first question, and again, remember, I've had to qualify these questions, so I'm going to be very clear. Chris, let's start with why we're all here, which is interactive advertising, supported by data in a privacy by design collaborative landscape. As the digital landscape continues to evolve due to shifts in consumer expectations, platform changes, and privacy regulations, how should brands be thinking about durable solutions from the programmatic buy-side perspective?
Thanks, Chris.
Approved by
question.
Google.
All approved. Yeah, thank you. And good morning, all. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I think it's a great tee up, Chris, but also a great open from Gay and JJ and Sarah. I think, really an inflection point in 2024. I think when we look at the market, if you look at kind of the media landscape changes, if you look at obviously the privacy changes, both from a regulatory point of view as well as some of the platform changes, and then not to mention the kind of disruptive opportunity that AI is bringing. So I'm just to tee it up. I'm personally, whilst I'm uncomfortably excited, I think, which is a term that Larry Page used to use in Google, but I'm certainly excited, and I'm certainly really happy to be collaborating much more extensively with the whole market as well as a result of some of these changes that we're all kind of re-architecting. So from an ads point of view and kind of a durability point of view, I work on the programmatic side of Google's business, so that's displaying video 360. I don't work for Chrome, who operate very independently of our ads business. However, Kunal, I believe, is in the crowd. There he is. If anyone has any pointy Chrome questions, Kunal will be more than welcome, more than open to answering those in the break. I'm sure anything around timelines or, yeah, he appreciates that. I know. So yeah, from a programmatic kind of solutions point of view, I guess what we're trying to solve for our customers is very similar to what a lot of people in this room will be trying to solve for their customers, which is how do you ensure that our customers can continue to reach those audiences or their audiences at scale in a really privacy safe way, right? So we're going about that with a few core principles. Firstly, we're not looking to replace the third-party cookie with an alternative identifier in DV360 or Google Ads for that matter. Instead, we're building out a kind of secure set of signals that we think are going to be kind of privacy forward, and there's going to be a variety of those. Secondly, we're big believers in anything that in media performance is very much dependent on accuracy as well as scale as well. So there's no point in designing something that's only going to reach a few people. We really, our advertisers and customers need that scale. And thirdly, across kind of the whole gamut of solutions at Google, we're really building out a portfolio approach. So some of those solutions will be turnkey, if you think about what we're building out in Google Ads, for instance. Others, more sophisticated solutions for enterprise-grade customers in DV360 will be, again, there's some turnkey, but there's way more kind of customizable solutions. So, and depending on the business and the business requirements, there'll be there'll be a fair few differences. If I could go in very briefly, just in terms of what we're developing
We're ahead
around.
of schedule, so take us.
Oh no, we're ahead of schedule. Wow,
Bury
there you go.
yourself as much as you want.
So I feel like I'm droning on. So specifically when we're kind of investing at the moment, based on where we see the market going, but also where our advertisers and customers need us to take them, we're developing around kind of 3 core areas. So privacy preserving technologies, for instance. So as JJ mentioned, Privacy Sandbox is one of those, but there's also kind of Edge and Microsoft and many others that we'll review over time. So we've been doing a lot of work there, again, like many in the room as well, who have been testing those new technologies. We're also obviously surfacing more AI in our tools than ever. I think we just had I.O. this morning, and there was maybe 130 mentions of AI in that. But as you know, Google's been an AI company since 2017, and we're really focused there, particularly with the advent of generative AI and how we can help customers in that space. And lastly, kind of first-party consented and collected data is an area of big investment for us. So you'll know, from our point of view, Customer Match, which is very much about our owned and operated inventory. But perhaps a new development in Pair is something that you might have seen bubble up over the last few days, and happy to chat more about that if it's useful.
Can you explain Pair?
Yeah, so Pair, firstly, in the spirit of getting away from some of the acronyms, and actually I think this is one of the few product names that I'll give our product teams some credit for. It actually makes sense, I think. So it stands for Publisher Advertiser Identity Reconciliation. And essentially what Pair is a privacy-centric and secure protocol that allows an advertiser to match their data with a publisher in a very secure way. It's enhanced with kind of advanced encryption. In fact, each data set's actually encrypted 3 times, and no one party has access to all 3 keys of that. So you can never decrypt that data. It's also worth mentioning this is all enabled by some of our cleanroom partners, 2 of which are on the stage today, Daniel and Richard, but InfoSum and LiveRamp, and it was actually Habu before InfoSum acquired there.
But technically, Google's a partner as well.
88.
So LiveRamp and Habu.
Yeah.
Yeah, ADH as well, right?
At the moment, it's just these clean rooms, not ADH at the moment. Okay. Yeah. So we are working with the clean rooms, and they are very much helping us scale the encryption process, obviously the data warehousing as well. And my last thing I'll say on Pair is, as I said, there's a bit of news bubbling up. We have just announced out of the IAB Tech Lab last couple of weeks that we're actually handing over this protocol to the IAB Tech Lab to handle. And it will become the standard way from an IAB point of view, and they're joining the efforts from the OPJA, the Open Join and Activation Protocol, I think. Private Join and Activation, thank you, JJ. They're combining efforts, so there's one industry standard, essentially. So that means it's not just a DV360 solution anywhere. It will be open source, so any DSP, any SSP, the industry can use this protocol. It will be the way that we match and reconcile, hopefully, advertiser data with publisher data. Yeah.
Does anyone want to talk about how the open sourcing of Pair will benefit them across the panel before I jump onto the next question?
So, yeah, I think it's a good question, Chris. And I think in general, open sourcing these technologies is net positive for the industry. We've been crying out to be involved with these sorts of programs for ages, because if you can use more of these secure technologies, then it's going to benefit end users as well as all the organisations involved. I think the only thing that's important to note with this group, though, is they're not a silver bullet. Things like OPJA/Pair, anyone who talks about privacy-enhancing technologies, they're not just saying privacy-enhancing technologies doesn't make you privacy compliant, because there's an aspect of security to them and there's an aspect of privacy to them. And if you still go and reveal individuals and be able to say exactly who they are as an output from this, you're still exposing information about who someone is, which, like, from what the government said so far, is going to be heavily regulated. So I think the approach that Google's gone with Pair to try to make that into a pathway where you don't have to reveal that information is going to be positive when we find these regulations when they land. But it's just important for organisations to work with their legal teams to know just by saying you use privacy-enhancing technologies doesn't make you privacy compliant. So net positive, but just make sure you do the right level of diligence in terms of understanding how you use these technologies.
I'd love to add something. I also think it's incredibly exciting, regardless of the timing of third-party cookie deprecation within Chrome. I think it's incredibly exciting to see the results in some of the tests with Pair. And so, like, we've done a lot of partnership with you, and we're seeing clients that are having 4x return on ad spend, leveraging Pair, which I think is incredibly exciting. And I think that we have to think about that as well, because it's scalability, and and we're seeing results with it because of the accuracy of how we're leveraging it and partnering it. And I think that's incredibly exciting for a lot of the brands and advertisers that are in the room as well.
Great. So thanks, Danny, because I think you're the only Australian vendor technology on the panel. I'm very strong on Australian companies, even little Australian company Paul mentioned called News earlier on, and what they're doing. But Vanya, as a true blue Australian data-rich and context-rich publisher, because you've got both the data and the fact you know contextually what people are searching for as well. I know that you've been very prominent on addressing deprecation and privacy. Can you tell us about your journey and what success you're seeing for you, but specifically your advertisers?
Yeah. True blue, is it me and you? Can't help it. My colleagues know if you give me a microphone, I'm bound to sing, so yeah, sorry, not sorry. So the journey for Carsales Media House and Carsales started 4 years ago. Signal loss, I like the terminology and the bucketing of that market dynamic coming at us, we saw very much as an opportunity. So we see ourselves as a data and tech business at heart. We disrupted how car buyers went on to buy and sell cars a long time ago, 25 years ago. And we wanted to tap into that kind of disruptor, innovative DNA in this current market challenge. And to use another true blue analogy, I'm going to use like a surfing analogy to try and explain the journey that we were on. So what we actually really wanted to do was, at the surf break, make sure that we were surfing that wave like pros rather than risking a complete wipeout. So we had a lot of motivation. We also, if we had a look at our internal, so business dynamics, you touched on the fact that we've got this incredible breadth of and depth of data. We have millions of Australians coming to our network of sites looking to buy cars, bikes, boats, caravans. These are massive ticket items for people, and they're done with a lot of research. Most of that research is done online through various browsers, various devices, and a lot of it is done on our sites. And the incredible thing is, so probably about 2.5 billion signals that we see over a quarter across our network of sites when people are in this journey to ownership. And in the process, so whether you're selling a car or buying a car, they're willingly and trustingly giving over their personal information. So in order to sell a car, submit a lead to a dealership, they're giving us their name, phone number, email, and postcode as well. So incredible depth of data. So the external market dynamics and our internal business dynamics meant that the first protocol for us was to ensure that we have a customer data platform that could really help us organise, make sense of that data, be able to activate on the data and have the right consent management framework in place for being able to deal with that data. So in 22, we were actually the first Australian-based marketplace to partner with Adobe's real-time customer data platform, which was a huge kind of leap. And that wasn't the only thing we wanted to solve for. The other thing we needed to solve for was identity. And in the same year, we partnered with another true blue Australian business, Adfixus, who really are committed to privacy by design as we are. So I like that terminology as well. And so if we're talking about, so going back to the surfing analogy, I would say that Adobe and Adfixus were our top of the range surfboard, right? We worked with you, Chris, and Jason from Civic Data to make sure that we're getting the right kind of direction and consultation. So you were our you made sure that our form was good before we got onto that wave. And I've got to say the result is we are confidently surfing it and surfing it well. I would say that the results that we're seeing as a business and our customers are benefiting from. So firstly, the combination of the CDP and identity solution means that we have an audience that's 100% addressable. So we're seeing our audience fully and understanding them, and our customers can advertise to their full market potential. So that's incredible. We saw, and some of the early results was segment size increases by 200+% or something like that, and incredible improvement in delivery of campaigns. The other thing we're able to offer customers is a way that they can activate on their own first-party data, right? So a lot of businesses are investing in technology themselves, and they have to justify that investment. So giving them the capability to be able to match their first-party data to ours. Some of the early tests with PII matching through Adobe saw 60% match rates with customers. So that was really good signs as well. From a non-PII first-party data, or I guess identity matching, we're using Adfixus and their data clean room to also solve for, so not just addressability, but measurement, which is another key challenge. So for our advertisers, we can now say to them that we can look at the activity that they're running on our site and how that's impacting their core metrics on their site in a non-third-party, cookie-reliant and privacy-compliant way. It's a mouthful. So yeah, all of those things together, and I can't. We really couldn't have done it on our own. It's about one key takeaway for me is you need to find great partners to work with to take you along the journey. But Chris, I don't know if we're allowed to talk about some other results from some of the clients that we're working with together on that matching front.
No.
I don't want to put you on the spot. Go on, tell them.
But I think if you were to... So another key observation I always see is first-party cookie versus third-party cookie. Generally, when I go into leadership sessions, again, no one still understands the differences. So Google has a first-party cookie, as an example. Facebook have a first-party cookie, and it is set on a domain such as client A. Now, that first-party cookie has a lifetime, correct me anyone if I'm wrong on this, of around 7 days as a first-party cookie. Anyone from Google gonna say no to that one? So a Google Analytics first-party cookie will last for 7 days within Chrome. So if you're buying a car, you're not gonna be doing that within 7 days.
7 months, median time.
That would mean if I go today to look at a auto manufacturer or even any e-commerce website, I will be seen as a unauthenticated first-party Google cookie ID. If I come back on the 8th day, I'm a new ID. So it's a really important thing to consider around attribution, visitation, personalization. So what we're seeing that we're not allowed to talk about on some of our clients is that if you have solved for that first-party, durable, consented identifier, and I want to be very clear about this, you'll start to see more and more around consent, because one of the key pieces touched on by Sarah earlier on that's being proposed is every business will have to show consumers on how they can update their consent preferences at any time. So while explicit consent won't be required, if you cannot demonstrate across all of these collaboration tools and everything else, how they can change their consent of where you've sent their data, how you're using it, how you're disclosing it, whether you're selling it, that's another report. But what I'm saying here is, with a consented identity, we're starting to see where Safari is definitely being overrepresented in unique users within Google Analytics, as one example. So anyone's doing platform-based reporting like that, and that doesn't match up to what we're seeing from the consented identity durable ID, such as the Adfixus tool, where you're starting to see actually this is one user who's come 3 times rather than 4 separate users. So I think you can all kind of put that together in your head about how that will save you on platform costs and everything else, and what you need to think about in regards to your reporting. Can you surf, Danny?
Absolutely not.
So let's stick with the local tech theme. August isn't far off. Now, August is only where what we don't know as legislation will be entered into the House of Representatives. But before we get caught up on what's changing, Can you start us off with some thoughts on where traditional data signals are weakening, yet industry players are collaborating on enhanced measurement and analytics in line with existing Australian privacy principles? So one other point here is, too often I also find where companies are breaking existing Australian privacy principles, let alone what's happening with reform as well. And the Privacy Commissioner is very clear that she'll also be looking at enforcement prior to reform as well, just as a heads up on that one.
Yeah, I can give that a stab, and I feel slightly embarrassed how frequently you're saying True Blue and thinking how bad I can actually surf. I reckon I can get a surfing analogy in here though. But yeah, it's a good concept, particularly when you talk about current privacy reform, because I think generally, I don't think thinking about current privacy versus future privacy is actually the right way to think about it, because I think if it's going to be something which is going to be regulated or is going to be kind of out of scope in the future, it probably means right now you shouldn't be doing it. So I think the essence in all of these use cases, and measurement's just one interesting part of the whole advertising value chain, which is good to look at, kind of always comes down to those kind of core principles, and just the really basic framework of the why, the what, and the how really kind of rings true in terms of explaining this. So I think anything we're doing end to end, like if you don't understand why you are doing it, then you're probably in a difficult space. And I think it becomes even more important when you get to a point where you're trying to explain to an end customer or to the government why you're doing it. And fair and reasonable test is going to really highlight this why fact. So for measurement, really, we're trying to measure to optimize ad spend. We're trying to reduce waste in what we're spending through the entire economy, and we're trying to improve the experiences of the end users, so they're actually getting the most effective experience from an advertising perspective. I think what signal loss is driving us to do now, and will continue to do into the future, is really challenge what does measurement really mean, and what is the right things we should be pulling into measurement. And I love the News Corp examples talking around things like not just talking about click-through rates. Click-through rates is something we've been addicted to for so long, or reach. It's what actually is the impact back to the business, and how do you measure that? Whether it be by footfall, whether it be by looking at the end result of financial transaction information, because that's actually what's coming into my business. Not just that, but how do I track against category? Sometimes we run a marketing campaign and we say, oh, my sales went down, but my sales might go down compared to a massive drop in market. So actually I performed very well. So I think signal loss is just driving us to this point where we're re-questioning what we should measure, and thinking about other data sources that haven't just been tracking pixels or tags through the internet. I think the final aspect of that, kind of the why, the what, and the how, becomes then how do we do that? And that's where this new wave of privacy enhancing technologies and clean rooms is giving us a fantastic opportunity to do this in a new way, which has the right level of protections, which are new security, new privacy controls. I was looking through some of the Ads Data Hub stuff the other day around some of their differential privacy that they enforce. So some really awesome new protections which are coming through. But again, the nuance in this whole space is understanding just because something is encrypted doesn't mean it's privacy enhancing to the point I was saying before. So knowing that there's different use cases of why you need to share data, why you need to collaborate on data, and that there are now these pathways to be able to connect data at that individual record level, so you can truly get to good measurement, but in a way which is actually helping to protect both the data and the privacy of individuals. So I think that kind of focus on the why, the what, and the how is important to what you're doing now with the current regulation. But if you're thinking about it in its purest sense, it's going to probably put you in a good stand for whatever changes the government ends up landing on anyway.
Because I think everyone here came from a very unique background. So LiveRamp, US originally, Habu, acquired by LiveRamp, US originally. Infosum, we'll hear from Rick in a second, originally out of the UK, born in a GDPR environment. Can you just explain, again, it's my bent for Australian technology, kind of where DataCo came from and the background of it, because I think that will help explain what I see. When Sarah mentioned that we're going to have a very unique privacy law here, I know from my own experience before I went to the US that some of the things we did here that was so unique weren't being done in the US at all. And it showed where spend on digital media dropped during the GFC. over there tremendously, whereas over here, because we were so competitive and great for our analytics, we looked right the way down to the cent on conversions and everything else. So I think I'd love to hear your background of where you guys came from before I jump on to Rich, because we also need to understand where the concept of InfoSum came from as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the kind of 2-minute version is Dataco was a secure data collaboration platform, which was actually built for not the advertising industry at all, actually. It was built for ANZ Bank and how they collaborate with their partners. And we spun it out and turned it into a separate standalone company to move it into a range of different use cases. So it wasn't trying to maximize reach or addressability. It wasn't designed for publishers, but really we've found the applicability to take it into other industries being very interesting. I think the core principles, as you've said, is like the way that you think about individual jurisdictions means it is very difficult to generalize these concepts. And it's the same kind of scaling issues we'll have taking our platform into different regions. We need to localize for things like GDPR. The guys from InfoSum who've built their technology in the UK, that'll be absolute bread and butter for them because that's the jurisdiction that they've built it into. But I think the key thing here is just noting that there are going to be nuances in all of these different areas. And really where our target is to do as, I guess, platform providers in this space is to try find consistency in standards. Like, I love the PAIR initiative being open sourced. I love having consistency in how we talk about doing this kind of protected matching and being able to try to apply that to different areas. And again, that's what the value of a lot of the IAB Tech Lab products are trying to do in terms of bringing them to different industries. So I think we all need to have that same mentality around how do we bring this consistency through to global markets while also recognising that there is going to be very specific nuances in different regulations.
Daniela, I saw you speak yesterday at News.
Yes.
So I'm excited about the answers to this. Given Australia's pending and upcoming regulations,
Yep.
how can marketers factor the shifting landscape into their clean room investments and make investments that will be sustainable for the far term?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about this actually when JJ was talking about this, and in the States we have to go through this 50 times because of the fact that we don't or won't really institute a federal privacy law. And so it's something that's near and dear to our hearts. So, I think at the end of the day, I think there's a couple of things I would think about. One is clean room is a technology, and we're talking all about the technology here. The clean room's really the technology that enables data collaboration. And Vanya, I think you kind of so eloquently talked about really how you have to get your data foundation in order, right? In order to really leverage a clean room because and to be able to really maximize the opportunities with data collaboration and what you can do with data. So I think there's a couple of things that I would do from a clean room. One is looking at your foundation, understanding what your foundation looks like and who the partners are that are helping you do that. When you think about clean rooms and data collaboration in general, I think there's a couple of critical things. Look, at the end of the day, I think some of the PET and the trusted execution environments and all of these other things, we're going to start to see a little bit more standardization. I think we'd probably all agree with that. We're nascent, we're early in this process. And I think we'll see some standardization around that. I think the other things that become critical are, and actually Paul talked about this earlier, is one, ensuring that you are working with partners that can be interoperable. Because at the end of the day, the partnerships that you have today might not be the partnerships you have tomorrow. And if you think about interoperability, right? If we think about cloud, if we think about how you need to connect data, making sure that you're not limited, right? And that you can connect with whomever it is that you want to connect with, wherever that data lives, I think is super critical. The other piece of it is ensuring that you have kind of a partnership ecosystem that you can collaborate with and understanding the data foundation that they have and how they're managing and using their data. And I think that's really critical because at the end of the day, you're coming together as a partnership and there's going to be some joint responsibility in how you leverage that data. And so those are some of the things that I think are critical. Again, I think we're super nascent in all of this. I think that this is going to continue to evolve and I think we're going to continue to standardize it. And the last thing I would say is stay super focused on what you're trying, I think Danny, you were just saying this, stay super focused on what you're trying to solve for so that you don't get so caught up in the technology speak is super important. but we can't lose sight of what we're trying to solve for, and there's lots of different ways to solve for. Yeah, and the last thing I would say is it all goes back to consumer consent, I think, at the end of the day. And when you look at your partnerships and things like that, ensuring that you have partners that you're engaging with through a clean room capability that have the same level of not just privacy focus, but also how they're managing consumer consent, I think is critical as well.
I think consent, I saw a lot of people writing down, if you don't understand consent, you're going to be way behind. We are finding consent management platforms that are still using third-party cookies as an example to recognize and deliver. So even if you think that your team has solved for consent management, probably haven't because it's broken, legacy systems don't work anymore. The other thing that's worth understanding, and I explain this in a way, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this when I go for your question as well, Rick. I explained to clients, and I had a client ask me the other day, where they said, "Hey, we've got one of our brands. They've said that we can use their email address list for certain purposes, and I think we're okay on the privacy side. And while we're not legal advisors, what I explained to them was, if you are going to do it, think of if anyone's collaborating on data internally or with partners, think of these buckets of data like liquid or bricks. So if you've got a bucket of red dye and a bucket of blue dye, and you pour it in, if you're asked in the future to allow someone to update their consent, or one of the other things around right to erasure that's coming up, the please delete me from all of your repositories of data, how do you unscramble that purpley brown mess if you have to? So if you instead say, right, these are Lego bricks, and I can easily sort those out, I can put it into these different kind of buildings and other such, but how can I, in the future, if requested, start to kind of decompile it and break down where it came from and so on as well. So just think about that aspect. Rick, and then some questions. What's your view on how businesses can ensure their data management practices pass what you define as the pub test? And the privacy, the pub test is actually a real thing on Wikipedia if you search it. When you talk about fair and reasonable, and Brett from ABC and I were having this chat a couple of days ago, I think privacy pub test will become the kind of common theme. If you want to understand fair and reasonable, it's like, could you explain this fairly in a pub? Tell me if I'm wrong on that one. But I would definitely also consider, outside of what we're about to hear around data collaboration, think about fair and reasonable when it comes to AI, machine learning, product development, personalization. Everything will have to fall under that fair and reasonable test. But, Rick, on to you, and there's some questions. What is a pub test?
Yeah, fair place to start. So pub test is, sorry, this chair is really laid back, awkwardly sitting. So pub test is, essentially asking the common person on the street, what do they think about this thing, and therefore is that fair? Is it reasonable that it's being used this way, with them not having any expert knowledge or any sort of experience working in that market? You know, is this something you could sell to your grandma? That, as an art concept, that's I think essentially what it would be. And it might sound a little bit frivolous, or a little bit trivial, but as we've discussed, with a fair and reasonable test within the upcoming amendments to the Privacy Act, that will require some element of subjectivity. Now, obviously, that subjectivity won't be people down the pub. It'll be a judge, and that judge will make that decision based upon expert testimony, for sure, but also a general consensus around what people expect to happen. And so what do you do with that? That obviously makes the line of privacy compliance particularly possibly a little bit opaque, a little bit non-exact. Obviously, GDPR is just a list of things that you have to comply with. You get a tick box in all of them, you pass. If you fail one, you fail. This obviously adds a little bit of obscurity there. Now, obviously, people like Sarah will do their best to try and define that as tightly as possible, but there's always going to be that bit of subjectivity. And so this is where you need to start thinking differently. To sort of the point I think that Danny was making, don't think about privacy compliance in the sense of, I need to be GDPR compliant, I need to be compliant to all the different states in the US. I need to be compliant to Australia. This is the wrong way to be thinking about things. You need to be thinking about privacy by design, because if you're privacy by design or privacy by default, then you already almost certainly, assuming there's no complete catastrophe, you're going to be approaching it the right way. And what privacy by design is, well, there's a number of different things that can feature into that, but it essentially always starts with privacy is not a hurdle to get over. Privacy is a business enabler that helps you to do business better for your customers. And that is a mind shift that I think we need to start thinking about. I can drop a few more bombs about what privacy by design might be.
Plenty of time and then some questions.
Okay. So just certain things like, just as ideas, non-movement of data, not moving data around. The days of having to share data around between different technologies to get some kind of collaborative results is over. You don't need to do that anymore. There's a number of solutions that can do that. And that's important because you've got to keep that data within your own environment, so you always know what people are doing with it, you always know who has access to it, you can update consent quickly, and things like that. It passes the pub test because when people give consent to a company, they will say, this company has got my consent. They're not thinking of all of the different ad tech vendors and all the other MarTech vendors that may have access to that data at some point in its lifespan. And therefore, that would be a sort of much more, I think, explainable to your grandma. Also, hashing. Hashing is not a magic spell. SHA-256 does not suddenly make your data, that's a little cryptography joke for anyone. Tough crowd. Okay. It does not magically make your data like 100% secure. It also doesn't change the state of that data. Hashed PII is still PII, as Danny was alluding to earlier. It's still PII. It's just physically unreadable. So that's not a lock, sort of a lock-on solution. We need to be looking at multiple hashing algorithms. We need to be looking at elliptical curve cryptography. We need to be looking at all kinds of synthetic IDs, one-time use. This is ultimately the future there. And the third one, never let anybody who's not in your organization have access to your raw or encrypted data directly. A lot of people won't like that one, particularly data scientists in the room, so hold your rotten fruit. But ultimately, you're the ones who are accountable, and it's not so much about protecting from malevolent activity, even though obviously that's there. It's more about fat fingers. People can accidentally write a Python script that's completely wrong, and all of your data's onto the internet. And therefore, if you follow those three things, they are sort of indicators towards privacy by design or privacy by default. And that's, I think, what you need to do to start thinking differently rather than what are the exact checklists I need to solve to be privacy compliant.
One of the best articles I've seen around hashing was written by, I don't know if it was here from the Louder Group or not, but there was a really great article they wrote around hashing. If you type in Louder Group and hashing, and especially when Sarah was talking about individuation earlier on, it doesn't matter whether you can see if it's an email address or not. Pretty much is the same device that you're targeting regardless. We've got time for a couple of questions. I've got prefab questions, but does anyone have any questions in the audience? That was the fastest hand up I've ever seen. So what's your name first and where do you work?
No, well, we know you can talk, but I want you to talk loudly.
Hey, everybody. Dave from Pinterest, and I just want to say thanks for the discussion, like lots of really good, valuable points there. I think, like, a little bit of setup. There's lots of reasons that cookies are going away, bad actors, consents, lots of different technical pieces. But one of the bits that I spend a lot of time thinking on is the depth of data that was being built out about people. So, third parties just linking and linking and linking, and some of the nefarious applications that kind of came out of that. Hearing about data clean rooms and also PAIR and other systems for data collaboration, it gets me thinking a lot about that depth of data that we're collecting on people. And I really wanted to zone in on Danny's point about privacy preserving versus privacy compliant. We're in a decent amount of uncertainties, probably an understatement at this stage, but how do we kind of determined that what we're actually building through data collaboration, through clean rooms, through pairs, doesn't follow us down that same path? And do we know as advertisers, publishers, industry, etc., where that line actually sits today? I think question to anyone and everyone on the group.
I think it's an awesome question, and I don't think anyone here is going to be able to completely nail that because of the ambiguity. But I think there's a few core principles, and I think the Privacy Act in Australia is actually principle-based, so going a principle-based approach is probably relevant here. But I think the whole traceability of where's your data going, what are you doing with it, and are you losing sight of it is probably something which everyone should be asking themselves. And I think Rick's point around, like, do people see your raw encrypted data? Does your data leave your organisation? And do we need persistent data being stored? Like, the ID spine space is something which I think is going to be continually debated in the community, because it's a really rich tool which allows us to do amazing things in terms of increasing addressability in the advertising space, getting better results, all the traditional metrics. Is that the best thing for our society if something goes wrong, and just the sheer richness of information it holds? I think we'll very much debate that. And I think the ACCC report on data brokers, which is going to come out imminently, will probably start to give us some more direction around how we should probably be thinking about that, at least here in Australia. But I think the key thing here is asking the right questions and starting the discussions now. I realised I completely missed my surfing analogy before. So what you want to be doing here is, if you were paddling out like years ago, you were probably too early. You didn't know what was going to go on. The wave's probably going to smash on you. If you wait too long, you're just going to be caught out the back. You're not going to catch the wave. So you need to start paddling now. Now is the right time to start your paddling, because you'll be the one who really catches the wave. How was that? Was that all right?
I like that.
Nailed it.
I think looking at the time, if you've got a great answer, I'm sure you have.
No, that's okay.
Because I see a couple of other questions.
How you doing? Chris Block at Flybuys. My one's for Danielle and Rick. We talk about interoperability, within the ecosystem. When are we going to start to see clean rooms collaborate and work together to be able to have InfoSum pass to LiveRamp pass to InfoSum?
I mean, great question. We have it with Snow as well. We could throw in like Samuha and Snow as well. I mean, I think part of how we do that is through like a connective like translator in terms of maybe not even identity, just thinking about like how do we translate identifiers across the ecosystem, so that if you're working in, let's say, a LiveRamp or an InfoSum or even like a Snow clean room, that as you need to potentially navigate across different clean rooms, that you have a consistent structure to be able to translate identifiers, if that makes sense. I mean, I think that would be kind of the first way that we do it. Like, we would absolutely, like on the LiveRamp front, when we work with either InfoSum, or if we're working with clients and they're working with InfoSum or they're working with Snow as an example, we will absolutely kind of embed or use like connectivity as a mechanism to translate identifiers across different clean rooms. And I think that's the start. I don't have a great answer, but I think that's one of the starting points. I don't know. Rick, if you wanted to.
Yeah, good question, Chris. So as with all great solutions, you've really got to start with the problem. What is the problem you're trying to solve with that? At the end of the day, I would say vast majority of those problems will be solved by cloud interoperability rather than data clean room specific interoperability. Because obviously with the challenges with data clean rooms is, even though it's this vast term, it sits over all these different technologies, each are very different in the way they operate. And a very core differentiator is, of course, decentralized versus centralized. And a decentralized, as soon as it works with a centralized, becomes centralized. So you kind of lose that sort of component. And so there's definitely ways of working. Persistent identifiers is not something we'll ever work with in that sort of sense. But synthetic one-time identifiers such as Pair and Opture and so on, that's something that we're all involved in. LiveRamp, us, everybody, Optable, so on, working towards getting something that's interoperable there. and will deliver whatever that last 5% of problem is that needs to be solved by that interoperability.
If I could also just say here on the cloud interoperability, I think that is the most critical thing. Any partner of anything you guys are doing, it's like the number one question you should be asking. I think we'd all agree on that.
One very quick build. I think at the moment, Pair is very much kind of intra clean room, so it's kind of siloed per clean room. Part of that IAB open sourcing, OPGJA, or was already working on this interconnectivity, I think. So to your point, Richard, we're hoping to see that from Pair point of view. Yeah.
So the digital platforms collaboration explainer from last year's IAB event, we do touch on the open protocol for joining activation, which is the OPJA. So it's definitely worth anyone technical in the room or telling your technical people to look into the OPJA aspect as well.
It also touches upon the decentralization, centralization that Rick mentioned there.
Last one.
Hopefully I'm not putting you on the spot, Danielle, but given you're working with so many overseas publishers that have already faced consent and where consent platforms are going, is there any one thing that you think that we could learn from GDPR and around dynamic consent frameworks, etc., that you could share with us?
Gosh.
One insight?
You're putting me on the spot a little bit. I think, gosh, I don't know if I have a great answer. I think one of the things that I would say is the biggest thing is value exchange and authentication. And I think a lot of you guys are already doing that. In fact, I know Australia was the first market to kind of adopt an authenticated kind of ecosystem and connectivity capabilities. But I think at the end of the day, where we see the most opportunity is when publishers really are clear about the value exchange that they're making with the consumer. And that makes like how you connect with them, how we can connect the ecosystem, a much more durable experience and also a much more enhanced experience for that consumer. It might not be the best answer, but I think like that's what we see, where we see pubs really winning. It's figuring out that value exchange and also having transparency about how that data then gets used within the ecosystem. Is that helpful? Did I do okay? All right, thank God. I'm not, thanks guys.
You passed,
Thanks.
Daniela, well done.
Am I invited back to Australia? That's the only question that I have.
Well, come back after August and see.
Okay, yeah.
So,
That's what I want to come back.
That was incredible. Thank you. I know you all were very helpful in getting everything past us, questions and everything. So that was brilliant. Thank you. I appreciate it.